because I know some individuals who do it. I know because I've spoken to you many times. There are some brilliant landlords in this world, but there are some shocking landlords who have no regard for the upkeep of a building and for the health of the people living in those buildings. So I hope that this is as promising as it sounds. Let's talk to Gavin Smart, the Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Housing. That's a professional body working with people in the housing sector. Good afternoon to you, Gavin Smart.
Good afternoon.
Just educate me a bit more, would you? Is this about those who would run housing associations, for example, as well as individual landlords?
So the changes that have been proposed to a bill that's already on its way through the Houses of Parliament are changes to a bill that's to do with the regulation of social housing. So that's predominantly housing that's provided by local authorities and by housing associations. And as you've just said in your introduction, it will introduce a requirement for people in key roles in those organisations, if they're not already, and many of them are, but if they're not already, to be qualified at either a level 4 or a level 5 qualification in housing. So it particularly relates to housing associations and local authorities.
And you already, your organisation already offers foundation degrees, doesn't it?
So actually, we accredit foundation degrees and other degrees. There was a minor error in the press release. We accredit universities to provide those courses, and we ourselves offer qualifications at a level 4 and level 5, as do a number of other providers. So there are already plenty of providers operating in the housing sector who have available the level 4, level 5 courses that will now be required if this bill passes through Parliament in the way it's currently drafted.
So there's plenty of people who are already qualified to the degree that this is suggesting.
There are a lot of people within housing already have level 4 and level 5 qualifications. We train about 500 people a year on those two courses. But what the government is seeking to do by introducing this requirement is to say that for key people in key roles, it's now an expectation that everybody will either have one of those qualifications or will be studying towards them. And the legislation sets out the people who are in scope for that, and it's broadly directors of housing or people who are in senior housing management roles. What we now expect to see from the government is a bit more detail on things like what's the timetable for the introduction of this, because obviously you can't wave a magic wand and make that happen overnight. So yeah, how will that process be managed? But the intention of the amendment the government have tabled to their own legislation is, once we get through that introductory period, people in these key roles in regulated social housing environments will have a qualification in housing at either level 4 or level 5.
See, the only heebie-jeebie I have about it is when they say that this isn't, that the thinking behind this is that it would bring housing into line with other sectors providing frontline services like social work, teaching, health and care services. Now, in some cases, in care services, there is very little formal qualification required. They just need hands and, a willing person who they then may give some minimal training to, and then off you go. I know not all caring is like that, but quite a bit of it is. So are you confident that this would be properly enforced?
So I'm confident that it will be enforced. The way in which the enforcement will work is that this is part of a package of measures that is being put through a new bill which will update the regulatory framework that affects local authorities and housing associations. And one of the clauses in that bill says that the Secretary of State can now require the regulator to have a standard about the competency and experience and conduct of the people working for it. And this is part of that measure, and it says for people in these key roles, we expect you to demonstrate to us that they are either qualified or studying to be qualified at the right level. So I think the regulatory framework will
at the right level for the kind of housing they're providing. So if you're an individual landlord with a flat to rent, that's one thing. If you're attempting to run a 20-flat building as a housing association, you need to know more.
Just to clarify again, yes, this is for social housing, for local authorities and housing associations in particular, and it will say your senior housing managers need to be level 4 qualified, your directors need to be level 5 qualified, right. And the organisations will be expected to demonstrate to the regulator that they are qualified, and the regulator then has sanctions they can apply if that standard is is not met. So this is part of a wider set of changes which are going through to improve the consumer part of the regulatory framework that affects social housing organisations.
And let me talk about landlords. I'm aware that they fall out with this qualification thing, but there is a line about them having to investigate and fix damp and mould within strict time limits. What's your thinking on that?
So again, I think this predominantly is about social housing regulations, so that applies to the kind of organisations we've been talking about.
Really? So you don't think it's to do with the private rental sector?
So that's my understanding. I'd need to check, but that's my understanding. But
because it isn't clear, is it? No.
The point to make, I think, is that actually a good landlord providing a good service will already have measures in place to make sure that these kind of concerns, these kind of complaints, are dealt with in a timely manner. So it's not unreasonable for the regulatory framework to have a kind of backstop provision. But I think the vast majority of housing organisations and housing professionals across the country already want to do a good job and already are doing a good job. So this is a backstop provision that makes it clear that there is an expectation that these kind of problems are dealt with speedily and appropriately. And I don't think you would get much argument from people working in the sector that was the right thing to do. So I think the provision is important because it makes it clear how important this is as an issue. But in terms of dealing with these kind of problems in a timely and efficient way, I don't think you would get very much argument for housing professionals that was the right thing to do.
Okay, and on the private rental sector, because it is such a big and growing sector now for so many people, I mean, what gets in the way of enforcing immediate? If there's damp in a house and it needs fixing, fix it.
So the government's certainly looking to improve the standards of management across the private sector as well, including making sure that there are a set of health and safety requirements.
But it needs to become a legal requirement, surely, that within a time limit you act on it.
I think that's a very good point. I think for me the issue is that the social housing sector, it's already a requirement as a social landlord you are registered with the regulator of social housing. So to be fair to the government, it is easier and quicker to introduce updated regulatory changes in a sector that already has it. It's more complicated to introduce it for the private rental sector. I'm not arguing against it for a moment, but to understand that there are thousands of very small private landlords in the private rental sector, so designing a scheme that works, that catches everybody and makes sure that everybody is actually aware of it, is a more complicated problem. I know it's one the government are very keen to address, but it is more difficult to do because of the number of actors involved, and the fact that there is not an existing regulator that they're all already registered with. So it's not important, and the government is not interested in it.
Right, so
it's a more complicated problem.
So if you rent privately, you may be doing it via a local authority. You may not. You may just advertise your flat in a estate agent or something.
And there has not historically been a requirement for all of the private landlords across the country to register with a regulator. So you have quite a lot of design work to get that right. Many local authorities have local registration schemes, and that's one route into this, but that's not a universal requirement.
But then I was going to say you can opt in if you wish, but ignore if you wish.
It is more complicated to require people to engage. So it's the social housing sector is a regulated sector with an existing regulator and a requirement that the organisations that are in scope must register. So it's more straightforward to introduce it. But you're right, it's equally important that however you live, whoever your landlord is, you should be able to expect that your home is in a decent and safe condition, and that should not be dependent upon what kind of landlord you've got.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, there are so many legal requirements around food quality, around the kind of service you get if you buy something, or you go and, I don't know, get your hair done and somebody shaves it off, or I don't know, there's all kinds of ways that you can insist on a certain level of quality, and housing, private rental seems to have been forgotten in that, doesn't it?
I don't think it's completely forgotten. There is already a set of health and safety requirements. Environmental health officers are able to intervene, so it's not there is nothing there. But I think the debate now is about what else should be put in place and how would that work. But the government is looking to raise standards across the board, and there is already a framework of standards around housing health and safety that does apply and is required of all landlords. So it's not the case that there is nothing there, but I think you're right that it is certainly the case that we could look to see how
up our
it could be
game.
improved.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great to talk to you. Thank you, Gavin. Gavin Smart, Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Housing. If you work in the housing sector, we'll come on to private landlords in just a second and private renters in just a second, but if you work in the housing sector, I'd be keen to hear from you on this, on whether you think that extra level of qualification is what counts. And when it comes to private rental, keen to hear from landlords and from renters, but what has been your experience of fixing things when they are wrong? And you know, that awful case, the poor little boy, 2-year-old, out of the shack dying because of the mould in the accommodation he was living in. Do you think your house potentially is making you unwell? 0345 6060 973. The usual number. You can text 84850 and tweet at LBC. It's 260.
This is LBC. It was just another day, a familiar drive through familiar country. But then, just around the corner, came the unexpected. He'd let his speed creep a little too high as he approached the bend, and he was no longer driving at the right speed for the road. The scary thing is, he didn't even realize driving even a little too fast for the situation is a major cause of collisions, especially on country roads where you don't know what's around the corner. Think. Don't let your speed creep.
Right, that's it. We need a bigger car.
Okay. Smart speaker, what's the best family car?
In reviews, the Hyundai Tucson has been named the best family car. Oh, very nice.
Okay, search offers on a Hyundai Tucson.
The Tucson Hybrid comes with up to £1,750 towards your deposit and 7.3% APR representative. And it's Hyundai, by the way.
Discover the award-winning Hyundai Tucson Hybrid. It's the dawn of a new Hyundai. Car Buyer Award 2023 ends 31st of March. Hyundai UK is a credit broker, not a lender. Terms apply.
Get all you need for less than you think. Now you can get BT broadband, even at ultra-reliable full fibre, from only £27.99 a month with no upfront costs. Plus, it comes with a £20 money-back speed guarantee and naughty security to keep you protected online. Yep, £27.99 sounds just fine. Switch to BT today as this offer ends 28th of February. New customers CPI plus 3.9% increase each month. 24-month contract broadband only £32.99 from number 25 terms apply.
Scalpel, please. Thank you, Les. Can we just move the light round? There. Perfect.
Meet Dr. Blake, always at the top of her game. Her hands are instruments of utmost precision. She's ice cold when she's in theatre. But even she cracked when pressed into making an investment decision. Investment scams can be hard to spot, and you could be targeted no matter who you are. Protect yourself from scammers. Visit ScamSmart from the Financial Conduct Authority.
At Lloyds Bank, we know how important it is right now to feel in control of your outgoings. Our 10-year fixed-rate mortgage means that while the cost of other things may go up, you can be sure your mortgage rate won't, allowing you to manage your finances in the short term as you budget for the long term. Find out more online, over the phone, or in branch. Lloyds Bank, by your side. Only available for Club Lloyds customers. Exclusions and conditions apply.
For the welcome back on Borders and the new curious river explorers. For the recliners and the fine diners. For the self-explorers and the Tanis warriors. For the moment and the memories. For luxury European river cruises with the reassurance you're in the safe hands of which recommended provider. Visit rivieratravel.co.uk or speak to your local travel agent. Riviera Travel, forever curious.
La creme de la creme. The bee's knees. Off the heezy faux sheezy? When you need a job doing brilliantly, that's a job for the Trust a Trader professionals. Pop in your postcode and what you need, and you'll find reputable and reliable local tradespeople, all who've passed the Trust a Trader 15-point assessment, ensuring that they and their work are top drawer. Find the Trust a Trader professionals at
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Sheila Fogarty.
Halim has tweeted to say, I joined a housing organisation. I had a master's in social housing, and I was disgusted with the immoral benefits of area managers and above in the pecking order driving company cars at taxpayers' expense. Says this tweeter, and a text here came in early on when we were discussing this from Kevin. A more simple solution to improve standards within social and private rental housing would be initiate mandatory annual inspections of homes by local authorities or qualified third parties. I agree, and I presumed that kind of thing was happening already, but clearly not. This should be funded by landlords with a legal obligation to rectify issues with meaningful regulation and enforcement for failures. That's Kevin in Chichester. Kevin, I am minded to agree with you. Steve in Newcastle upon Tyne. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Sheila. Second-time caller. I just rang in to correct this two things. The first one is the idea that there isn't mandatory training requirements for private landlords. In any area, local authority area, where there is additional or selective licensing, so in my area there are both of those, and that applies to any property over 2 bedrooms.
What applies? What do you have to do?
It's a local authority licensing scheme. You have to pay for the license every 5 years. The prices vary depending on the property, but between £750 and £1,000. You then have to, in order to retain your license, you have to receive 5 hours annual training.
What does that involve?
That involves either training provided by the local authority or the National Residential Landlords Association. It will mean attend. So, for example, recently Newcastle City Council have run a programme on inventories and deposits, and it's a mandatory requirement once the licensing scheme has been created. So the idea that there isn't, illustrate
but is it compulsory that you do that before you attempt to rent a house or a
no,
flat?
it's where, yes, if you're in an area of licensing, yes it is, and every local authority
Yes,
can
what do you
create
mean if you're in an
licensing
area of licensing?
in an area where the local authority has created either a selective or an additional licensing scheme. Those are the two schemes that exist.
But if I chose to ignore it and rented my house out via an estate agent,
and you would be liable to an unlimited fine and a period of imprisonment. So the idea that there are no regulations, the issue is that, and in Newcastle at the moment, the local authority do carry out physical inspection of properties and are doing so. I'm a private property investor. I have no problem with any of that, because I think the sooner poor accommodation is stamped out, the better for all of us. So, please, I have degrees in both law and estate management, and I still have to do my 5 hours training here. So I do it. It's as simple as that.
Adrian says, go on, make your second point.
Second point was, with regard to the poor little child who died, I need to point out that he wasn't in a private sector rented property, he was in a housing association.
No, I know.
Key issue. It's a key issue, though, because we get blamed for an awful lot that we're not guilty of.
It's a key issue in his case, but there is some shocking private rental out there.
Well, there are, but as I said, schemes do exist. Local authorities do have the powers to impose licensing schemes. They have to make application to the Home Secretary with their scheme, and the Home Secretary can either approve or allow the scheme or disallow it. The vast majority have been allowed that have been introduced so far.
What do you think of this? Adrian has tweeted to say private landlords should be banned. The state should force buy these properties and have them as social houses. Housing shouldn't be for profit. Everyone deserves a decent home. Landlords should get a real job.
I can't see why I would want to make conditions in the rented sector worse, because that's what that would do. I acted for, in my private capacity, I acted for a group of residents against the housing association. I won't name it, but I did. At their request, because my late mother-in-law was living there, we secured compensation of £80,000, which was good. Not so good against
what were they doing wrong?
Oh, would you like a list? They descended on the property and told a bunch of old people in supported accommodation that they wanted £12,000 from each of them after they'd been managing the property for 25 years, is what they did.
On what grounds did they claim they wanted?
On the grounds that it was necessary maintenance. Funnily enough, I didn't find that acceptable, and neither did the residents, and we won. They conceded without a court hearing, basically because they were wrong.
So you strongly believe, and you sound like a very responsible landlord, you strongly believe that the more you encourage and enforce responsible landlording, the better everybody is.
That is absolutely correct. And what's more, if you try stamping out the private rented sector, if you think you have a housing problem now, believe me, we will really have a housing problem, simply because we're not building enough houses, and we know that. But the answer is, make all landlords good landlords. It isn't difficult, and you can provide good accommodation, look after your tenants and look after your properties.
All right, Steve, thank you. That sounds like you do, Steve, in Newcastle. Victoria's called from Blackpool. Hello, Victoria.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm looking forward to speaking to you about this. It's a subject that's very close to my heart, having been in a position where I am still a private tenant, moved to St Anne's on Sea at the end of 2019. It was November, and within 6 weeks the master bedroom was absolutely engulfed in mould. We contacted the letting agents who we sent photos to, and they said that it was our fault because we needed to ventilate the property. That it was basically because we were breathing, I think is the upshot.
Could you open windows? By the way, I'm not suggesting that's the solution to mould. I'm saying, could you open windows?
Well, yes, we could open the window, but bearing in mind that it was the end of December, very cold, we were paying to heat the property, then to open windows to let the heat out. It seemed a bit of a counter.
But you can. Well, I'm not telling you what to do. Clearly, there's more to your story than windows. But I open a window every time I leave my house. I leave a little bit of it open, and there's a lock on it.
Yeah.
And, you know,
we were actually advised, because in the end, because nothing was we did what they suggested, and the problem did not resolve. The landlord wouldn't do anything. The letting agents were very obstructive, and in the end, we ended up getting the local council involved. They inspected the property and said actually it wasn't down to poor ventilation. There were a number of issues.